And I'm ecstatic to like take a tour and hear what Michael has to say about the building, because he has done his homework, not on just the building, but even in this area in general. But anyway, this is Michael Thomas, and his wife Janice also owns the building with them. And I think I'm just going to let you start talking,
Yeah.
Michael. I'm
And
really
we'll
excited.
finish up with Janice. She's the brains in the operation. I'm the janitor, basically. Yeah. Janice ran the cooking school. Well, thank you for coming. So I'll keep this as short and sweet as possible. If you have any questions along the way, just stop me and I'll try to help you. So this building was constructed in 1879. It was sold to the Liberty Grove School District number 2. I don't know what number 1 was, but this was number 2. And John Eliason, who got his name gringoized to John Eliason, actually sold the property to the school district for $2. I have the original deed from that transaction. Yeah, I was pretty surprised, but I went into the vault in Sturgeon Bay and I found the deed. And it's had a long and storied history. The short version of the history of the building, the original building, the front of the building used to be right here. This was the front of the building. And there are pictures in the entryway that you can see various stages of this building. The room that we're standing in now, this part of the building was built in about 1900, 1905. And I know that just from reconstructing photos and talking to a few people that thought they knew. Whether they knew, I'm not sure. But in any event, it was expanded in 1900, 1905. And when I became interested in the building in 2004, I knew I had to make a mad scramble to try to find anybody who ever went to school here, because I did the math on the age and they were all getting up there. Luck would have it, I found 3. One of which was Dorothy Peterson, who lived kitty corner across the street. She was a little girl, and there's a picture of her in that entryway on a teeter-totter. And I brought those people over to the school one-on-one, and Janice made scones or cookies or something, and we sat down and I interviewed them, for lack of a better term. So Dorothy Peterson was one. Another one was Sid Telfer. And the Telfer family has a long history in Door County. And Sid, it would have been Sid Jr., who actually went to school here. And the third person I found was Genevieve Follingstad. And I don't know how many of you know Genevieve. A wonderful person. And Genevieve, somehow, it might have been through staff or somebody at the Viking who said that Genevieve had some history in this building. So I brought her over here and we chatted, and she pulled out a picture and she said, "There's my mother." Her mother was a school teacher in 1910. And there's a picture of her mother. The mother looks like she was 12 years old, but she's in that picture. And you can only imagine what a wilderness Ellison Bay was. Did you know them?
Yeah. She was teaching English in high school.
Her mother?
Yeah. Olga.
Yeah.
And Genevieve was I think she was our first membership. Was she our first?
Yeah, she was.
First membership person for the historical society.
And she was a Wickman. She was born in what is now the Wickman. Well, now it's something else, but she was born in that building. And anyway, so I was able to get all those people interviewed and took copious notes of all of that. And so during the process, I wanted to preserve the building historically, not just aesthetically. I wanted to ensure that it was restored historically. And so I went to the State of Wisconsin Historical Society and wanted to register the building as an historic building. And I jumped through loops and hoops and more loops and more hoops. And the long story short, I was working with a young man at Madison, and he said to me in one of our conversations, he said, you know, we've been looking at it. It doesn't even look like a school to us. And I said, well, I can't help that. I didn't build the building. And I said, you have to, he said, well, most buildings in that era would have been built out of stone and mason, you know. And I said, sir, the only material that was available in northern Door County in 1879 was cedar, lots of it. And so I finally got so frustrated. I said, you know what? I don't need this. And I'm kind of glad it was a blessing in disguise for me, because if you get it registered as a historic building, you can't modify anything without going through a bureaucratic mess. And I wasn't going to do that, but in any event, I finally just said to the guy, you know what? I don't need that. So I made my own plaque and put it on the sign. I didn't.
It's a beautiful sign.
Yeah. Yeah, and I paid good money for that. That was a company in Lake Mills that do historic-looking plaques. So when I bought the building, the owner at that time was a woman named Renee Saison, and she had a women's dress shop in here for a while, and she lived in the first floor of the building. And I never met her personally, so I can't really say much about her history here. But I know that Renee was only the second private party that owned this property. And the previous party was Jay and Hannah Rogers. And the Rogers family were timber barons over on Raleigh's Bay. They owned huge tracts of land in Raleigh's Bay. And I have a picture of Grandma sitting right in that corner in a rocking chair in the probably 40s, I would guess. And the windows, all the windows that you see are original, at least where they were. They're new material, obviously, but in any event. So then I found out that their son, Clinton Rogers, actually lived in this property as well. And Clinton was one of, I don't know how many children the Rogers had.
We should know. We should know.
Well, I know they had,
It was our last program at the top of the
yeah, so you had Jane and Leland, and you had Clinton and Rosie, and I don't know the other ones. Oh, Winfield, mild omission. So in any event, the Rogers family owned the property, and when Jay and Hannah moved out, then their son Winfield and what was her name again?
Well, there was Jane and Leland.
Yeah, but what was Winfield's wife's name?
No, I don't know her name.
That was Katie.
Vera. Was it Vera? I don't know.
Well, the son of Jay, and they moved into the house, and he became the postmaster. And what is now the store was a post office, and I have signs or pictures of that as well. And then digging deeper, I find out that I need to find where Kay Rogers was. Her married name then was Ketterington, or Kettering? Yeah. Anyway, so I brought Kay over here. And I brought Clinton and Jane over here. Rosie was still alive. Clinton had already died, so I couldn't interview them. But I brought Kay in here, and same thing. We had coffee and cookies or whatever. And I'll never forget, we were sitting in the middle of the room, and I noticed that she was getting very emotional. And I just kind of backed off for a little while, and I went and got some water, and I came back, and I asked her if she was all right. And she said, well, I was born in that room. I went, oh, I could see why you would be emotional being in here. Yeah, she was an only child, and she was born in like 1942 or thereabouts. But
39.
was it? Oh, there you go. Thank you.
She
Listen.
just passed away.
Yeah, I know she did. She lived.
But she was in the same class in Gibraltar as what he was.
Okay. Yeah, she was a neighbor of mine at Cottage Glen. Yeah. In any event, her room really didn't change much. There was a window that faced north that I had to take out because I needed to put hoods and cooking equipment in there. But then she told me a little bit more about the story of when she lived here. So that's kind of who's lived here. The building, the only thing that I was able to save 100% are the floors you're standing on. These are original. Everything else in here had to be redone. The windows, the doors, insulation, ceilings. There used to be a wall here. So I didn't change the configuration, really. I just opened up what was here a little bit. This room was cut into 2 rooms. And so I started with an idea and a budget, and I went over that budget probably in week 3 of the project.
So, was that room back there, was that just the building by itself? That was the original building?
Well, funny you should mention it. And if you look at the pictures in the hallway, there were a couple things that had me stumped for a while. Number one was where was the school bell tower? And I was determined to find out how that was. So the pictures, I kept putting the pictures together, and then I realized that you would only put a school bell in the front of a building. You don't put it in mid-shift. You put it in the front. And I thought, well, I never could find anything up there. And then it dawned on me, the school bell used to be right over here. And I confirmed that because I found a hole in the ceiling where the rope wore the hole. That's how I found it. And I said, that's where the bell was. So the bell that was on the building, I don't know what happened to. I don't know what happened to it. But the bell that's up there now came from the clearing. And I can't remember who gave it to me. And myself and Russ Cockburn manhandled that thing and built the cupola for it by ourselves without cherry pickers, or we were so stupid, we didn't even have safety lines on as we're dragging this 150-pound bell up there. But the bell is up there. It is still operable. And once again, when you look at some of the pictures, it will be clear to you why it was where it was. And I was determined to put it back because I saw pictures of that. I found pictures of when this was built. But the funny thing is then I couldn't figure out how in the world, before this room was added in 1902 or 5 or whenever it was, how that could possibly be a school. Well, it's because the building used to go back 40 feet. And yeah, the building went back 40 feet from what you see today. And it's been that way for a long time because there's a big daddy pine tree that would have been in the way. It wouldn't. So the pine tree, I don't know how old it is, but any event, so that explained. And it was Hannah and Jay Rogers who cut off the back of the building. And I don't know if they did. I'm not sure why they did it. They were not alive. I wasn't able to talk to them, and both their children, they couldn't remember why they would have done that. But the building went back a lot further. So my job here was to restore it to its natural look, if you will. And the first major project I had was the exterior of the building was a disaster. I mean, it had 145 years of paint on it. And so I hired a young guy from New Zealand, Robert Morrow, and I rented scaffold from Lampert's, and we put it up on the southwest corner of the building. And after 2 weeks, using power tools, scrapers, sanders, heat guns, he cleared an area that was probably 8 by 10. And that took 2 weeks. And I said, we're going to be here for 6 months or more doing that. So somebody said, well, you should have it sandblasted. And I went, well, really? I could do that? And they said, sure. So I went and talked to Bud Calms, the town of Liberty Grove, and I said to Bud, and I'd had a relationship with him because we'd started the school at Virginia Olson's farm back in 2000, whatever that was. In any event, I said, so I'm thinking of having the building sandblasted. Do I need to get a permit? And he said, no. And I looked at him, I said, Bud, you realize there's paint on there that's like 150 years old. And he said, oh, I know that. And I said, and you know what the primary ingredient in that paint was? Right. If I had to do this in Tucson or Milwaukee or anywhere else, they would have made me tent this whole building, and they would have all been in hazmat suits. And I said, you're sure this is cool? He said, no, that's fine. Talk to your neighbors. So I went to all the neighbors, and I told them what I was going to do, asked for their permission, and told them that I would wash their house and wash all their cars when I'm done, because I knew it was going to be a disaster. And they all said, go for it. So I did, and I hired Tim's Sandblasting on Egg Harbor. And I don't know if any of you know anything about sandblasting, but when you sandblast, there isn't a valve that adjusts pressure. The only way you adjust pressure is by distance. So I knew I had cedar on this building, and I knew I had to be careful with it because it's a soft wood. So we set up scaffold, and he was about 10 feet from the building, and he did a sample piece, and it was really marking the wood. And I went, uh-oh. He said, that's no problem. Long story short, by the time we agreed on a distance that wasn't going to damage wood, we were about 18 feet from the building. So we're shooting a spray, he was shooting a spray of silicon sand 18 feet across the yard and hitting the building. And when it hit the building, it was like Chernobyl. I mean, there were just clouds of this awful debris. But when it got done, it was the most, I don't know if any of you noticed it, but when we got it done, it was the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, because there wasn't one knot on one board on this building. Not one. The entire thing was clear cedar. And somebody said, oh, you should keep it that way. And I said, but then it wouldn't be an original looking school building. And so broke my heart, but there's a good picture of what it looked like when it was sandblasted. And we could have covered it, but I said, have you ever seen a school building built in the late 1800s that wasn't white? It's the only color they had. So it killed me, but I primed it and repainted the building. And got it done. And it was a massive cleanup project. I can't even tell you how many yards of sand we had on all parts of this building. Of course, none of us were wearing respirators. And so if you see me laying dead in the street one day, you can probably say, I know why he died. Yeah. Even my wife said, were you wearing a mask out there today? And I said, nah, I don't need a mask. Terrible. I'm not proud of that, actually. But in any event, so we got that done. Another big thing that we knew in the very beginning, and when I say I hired a really talented artisan carpenter who did the farmhouse with me. His name was Russ Cockburn. And he was an artist. He wasn't a carpenter. He was an artist. And we would stand in a room and we'd say, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And he'd hem and haw, and then he'd come up with something and we'd agree on it. But we knew that we had to really work hard to save the floors. We knew we couldn't, there was nothing worth saving otherwise, other than the exterior of the building. We knew that had to be. But, so we stripped it to bare bones and started all over. And we were finding some interesting artifacts behind some of the plaster in the walls. Empty whiskey bottles, all kinds of interesting things. So that was the interior thing, but now we've got to get central heat and air conditioning in this old girl. And that was not going to be easy, because we have a crawl space over about 3/4 of this building is crawl space. And for those of you who know Ellison Bay, if you went out right now with a shovel and dug into my side yard, you'd hit sand for probably 4 feet. Not rock, you'd hit sand. And so the basement, the crawl space, was about that high, and it had all these old cast iron pipes, and we had to get duct work and electric work and all kinds of plumbing in there. So I hired 2 guys. I don't even remember their names, but I told them what I wanted them to do and asked them if they were willing. And they said they would be. And I don't know, has anyone ever seen the movie The Great Escape with Steve McQueen? Okay, do you remember what they did when they dug the tunnels to escape from that prison? They devised a trolley, and a guy would go down into the hole, and he'd fill the trolley with the dirt, and then there'd be a guy on the outside of the hole, and he'd pull the trolley back towards him and have to dispose of the dirt somewhere. Well, we did that in that basement for 3.5 weeks. We extracted almost 40 yards of sand and debris down there. I mean, unbelievable. And those guys, they would take turns. We called the man in the hole and the man outside. Well, the man in the hole, like I said, the crawl space went from about there to now it's about here. But now we got to get in there with sawzalls and cut out all the steel pipe. And that's kind of a loud racket, especially when you only have about 18 inches of space to work with. But we got all that out and got the ductwork in. And once again, we found a lot of collectibles down in that crawl space area. I don't know if that was Clinton's era or Winfield's era. I don't know whose era it was, but it was somebody's era. But we managed to get all the heating and plumbing in. And then the county, because this is a commercial building, the county was very vigilant about making sure that I build it to current code. For example, all the ceilings in here are fire-rated ceilings. This is a stress laminated beam that had to be engineered and approved. And they announced to me about 2/3 through the project that I can't heat and cool that room on the same ductwork system that I have in here. So that created another problem. So now I got to get into that room and get ductwork and plumbing and what have you. But that's code. You can't contaminate space in this, and I couldn't do the bathroom either on the same ductwork. So once again, I thought first of all I could do it in 3 months, and I had a budget in my mind, and it went 3.5 times that, both money and, well, actually more than 3 times money-wise, but time-wise, it took a year plus to do it. And I think that's pretty much the story of the building. There is an upstairs in this building. I'm not going to have you go up there because they're very steep stairs. Rosie and Clinton, when they lived in this building, they lived upstairs. And there was a bathroom up there, and there was a bedroom. That space now is basically all open. It looks like I have Janice's offices up there, and that's been heated and insulated and all that. But the rest of the space up there is just a big blank palette. The smart thing we did do is we did put all the rough-in plumbing, heating, and electric and plumbing up there, because it would be impossible to do now. I mean, well, you could, you'd have to tear all this apart. So we talked about improving that space and building a space up there, but I knew Janice and I were not going to live up there. That's too close to home, so to speak. And I knew I didn't want to be a landlord and have people up there. I just didn't want any, so I never finished it. And I saved myself a lot of money by not doing that at the time. But there is a garage what Clinton built in about 1970. It's not worth touring. But the upstairs is really nothing to see other than its beautiful floors just like this. They just haven't been finished yet. They're still pretty rough. But it could be made into a really cool apartment. And I don't know what else I can tell you about the building. The history of the building was what drew me to it. And I'm a history buff. That's what I love to do. I lived. Did any of you know Virginia Olsen? Did you know her?
Yeah.
Harvey was her husband. No, Harvey.
No.
What was his first name? He was dead by the time. Well, she's an interesting story. The farm that we used to live on, that was a log house built in 1847. Yeah, well, that's the second one.
Oh, that's the second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the old guy. Yeah, the old guy.
Question here.
Yes, sir.
How long was this a school?
This is a school from 1879 to 1929.
And what years was it a post office?
From about 40, let me think. Clinton, during the height of World War II, got called to duty, wasn't qualified to be in the military, but that was civilian work, so he had to go to Manitowoc to build ships for the Navy. And I think they lived here until probably 44, so probably 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not positive on that.
What's the name of our?
Before we leave, I'd like to take a look at your stairs, see if they're like our stairs.
We have an old farmhouse on.
Well, these stairs. Well, that's another story. Originally there was a stairway. You walked in the back door, and there was a stairway that went right upstairs. But I needed.
Pretty steep.
Yeah, ours are very. So I had to take that stairway system out, and there was also a stairway into the basement.
Oh, so the steep stairs aren't there anymore?
the exterior ones I built are there, but the ones that were here originally, no. I had to take them out. Yeah, and they were very steep,
Yeah.
non-conforming to say the least. But I needed that wall for sinks and.
Our roof is going up and down the stairs.
Yeah. So if you stick your nose in the other room, I'll tell you a story before we go in there. But there's a garage, and any of you who knew Clinton Rogers, he was a motorhead. He was always cars, motorcycles. He had hot rods. And so when I bought the property, I didn't really look in the attic of the garage until one day Janice said, "What's that hole in the ceiling?" I said, "Well, that's to get in the attic." So I got a stepladder and went up there, and I went, "Oh my God." It was filled with car-related stuff, radiators, hubcaps, you name it. And I'm not a car guy, so I didn't really, but I wasn't going to throw it in the trash either. So I know a guy, Steve Dobner, who's a car guy. He's a car guy. And I called Steve, and Steve did all the wiring for the farmhouse, did all the wiring for the stereo and the telephones and things like that. So I said, "Hey, do you want to come over and look at this stuff that I have in the school building? And I'll trade you out to do all the wiring for the speakers that you see in here and the telephone lines and all that." And he said, "Sure." Well, he got up in that attic and his eyes just bulged out. It was like the lost gold of the Yukon. I mean, he was just thrilled. And so I cleaned out that hole upstairs, and I was in there one day and cleaning up, and there was a board in there that didn't match any other boards in the floor up there. And it was just a weird looking thing. And every time you stepped on it, it kind of moved. And being the curious guy that I am, I went back down, I got a pry bar, and I came back upstairs and I popped this board out. And if you look in that room next to you, you should go look at it. On the wall, right there, you'll see the board that was on the floor. It's on the wall in here.
The sign?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, that was laying upside down on the attic of the garage. And somebody asked me the other day, we have some interested people for the building, and they said, "Is that sign included?" And I said, "No, the sign's not included." Then Janice said, "Well, where are you going to put it?" And I said, "I'll find a place to put it." Yeah.
Did it say who I'm on the postmaster stuff again, post office. Did it say who because next door was Severson.
Yeah, that became the post office after this.
Right, but this Jordan was our guy that came around driving the mail and dropping it off.
Right.
And that was before Severson, I think.
Could be.
So I was just wondering.
I don't think Winfield was the postmaster very long. I don't know that for sure. Yes, he was.
That wasn't in my memory.
So what is now the marketplace or store, that was the post office.
Okay.
And ironically, 30 years ago, Janice bought me a postman's desk in Door County.
Okay.
And I had it in Arizona, and I brought it back here, and it's in that room now. Yeah, it's a cool old, and once again, somebody said, "Is that included?"
So
yes, sir.
probably not everybody in here knows like what then you and Janice turned it into.
Right.
Right, we don't know that.
Go ahead, sir. What did you?
When they added on in the early 1900s, then the addition went from that wall all the way up here. Everything that's here is that when that was added?
When this room was added, this front part of the building, and there's some very clear pictures, the back part of the building was still there. So it was a pretty big space then. Yeah, it was pretty big. So from 1900 to 1929, it was a pretty big space. But I knew from Genevieve that the girls came in on that door, and I knew the boys went in on that door. I knew that for sure. And was it more than a two-room schoolhouse? I've never seen an interior picture. So I'm really not sure.
I went to Newport and that was just a
Yeah, yeah.
And you said this rectangular space was subdivided into 2 rooms?
Well, there was a wall right here. Yeah, it went this way. Mm-hmm.
So, Michael, if the girls came in on this side and the boys on that side, this was the wall that divided?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Were the girls taught separately from the boys?
That I don't know that. I don't know that. I would suspect not, but I don't know that because you only had one school teacher. So, and then there's a local person who happens to be in this room right now, who's steeped in history of Ellison Bay, and she came over one day and she said, "Look what I have," and she gave me 2 school books from the early 1900s that are once again treasures. They're not displayed out there because I would be terrified somebody would take one, but one is I'll introduce her as Nancy. That's Nancy who gave me this. I think one was a geography book, and one might have been math, or I can't remember right now. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, when we got done with the restoration, the reason we did it is what you see now was the Savory Spoon Cooking School. I don't know if any of you ever came here for a class, but we started that in the farm in 2004. And we took an old farmhouse, and I had to do the same thing there as I had to do here. It had no heating, no plumbing for what we needed, so we had to rebuild that whole thing. And that was a big project. But this was more. But in any event, we started the cooking school there, and Janice and I, just brief history, used to be in the restaurant business. When I met Janice in 1980, she was an ER nurse, and I was a commercial real estate broker. And we had 3 kids, and by 1985, we had 4 restaurants in Tucson with almost 350 employees. And we ran that for 20 plus years. And Janice was a stay-at-home mom in the beginning. And then over time, she became a big part of the business. So in 2001, I broke my back in a pretty bad skiing accident, and I was homebound for 7 months. I couldn't drive a car. I couldn't go anywhere. And so I said, okay, that's it. You can't run a restaurant company with 350 employees from your house. It doesn't work. And so we sold the company. And then we did a blood pact that we would never open any more restaurants. And I made her, I was serious. I said, this is it. I'm not kidding about this. We had a great run. We were less than 30 when we started and made a lot of money, had a lot of fun, but no more restaurants. So then we traveled for about 3 years, and we'd be in Timbuktu, Argentina, or some faraway place, and Janice would be having coffee or something, and she'd say, I had this idea, this really small little French bistro, but I said, stop, immediately, stop. So she'd give up, and then a year later, she'd say, I had this, I'd say, stop. But then one day she came to me and she said, I really want to teach cooking. And I went, okay, all right. So how does one go about doing that? And she said, well, I want to go to culinary school. And I said, okay, just so we're clear on this isn't going to lead us back into the food service business, right? She said, no, I just want to teach cooking. I said, okay. I said, so where do you do that? And she said, well, I really want to go to the Cordon Bleu. And I went, the one like on the other side of the pond over there? And she said, yeah. And I said, okay, go for it. So 2 weeks later, she packed her bag and went to Paris and was there for 4.5 months. And we would talk, this is pre-cell phone days, we would talk, she would go to a corner phone booth and call me from the phone booth. And she lived with a madame who had a beautiful house, and Janice rented a room and went to the Cordon Bleu. And she came back from that and started teaching in Portland, Oregon, and Phoenix, Tucson, Chicago. And she liked it, but we tried to buy a cooking school in Tucson called Culinary Concepts. It was really cool. But the woman was not reasonable, and we finally gave up on that. And so then one day in 2003, maybe, 2002, I said, it was a hot August day in Tucson. It was like 110. I said to Janice, I'm going to go to Door County. I'm going to buy a piece of land. And I had deep roots here. My family's had a house in Sister Bay since the early 70s. And she said, great, basically get out of my hair, go. So I came up here, I rented a car in Green Bay. I drove up, I stayed at my parents' house. And I talked to this realtor. And I told him what I was looking for, like a 10-acre piece of land. I'm not going to build a house. I just want to own the land and relax for a few days up here. And he said, okay, great. So he picks me up the next morning, and he drives me The first place we went to, he drives into the driveway of a farm. Log house, barn, granary, pump house. And I looked at him and I thought, oh, that's weird. Maybe they're selling off a back portion of the property or whatever. I said, what are we doing here? And he said, well, I wanted you to see this place. And I said, I don't want to buy a farm. I didn't come up, I'm not doing that. But as a courtesy to the seller, having been a broker in Arizona since the mid-70s, it would be rude for me not to walk through the house after she had cleaned it up and now everything was ready. So I walked through the house, did kind of this cursory thing to be polite. She wasn't there, obviously, but I went back to my parents that night and I was sitting on the deck and I was having a beer and I thought, wow, this could be something that would work. So the next morning, I introduced myself to Bud Calms, never met him personally. And I said, Bud, what would it take to put a cooking? I said, you know where Virginia Olson's farm is on Highview Road? And he said, of course I do. And I said, well, what would it take to put a cooking school in that building? And he looked at me and goes, what is a cooking school? What is that? And I tried to tell him a little bit about it. So he got his code book out. It was a 3-ring binder and it was, like 18 inches high. And he's fiddling through the pages and he finally stops and he said, well, you just need a home occupation license. And I said, oh, and he said, will you have more than 2 employees on the premises besides you and the other owner? No. Will you do this? Will you do that? No. He said, will you get a home occupation permit? No problem. And I went, okay, how long would that take? And he said, about 10 minutes. You want to do it now? And I said, no, whoa, Nellie, I haven't bought the property yet. And so I went back to my parents' house and I called Janice and we small talked for a few minutes. And I finally said, you need to come up here immediately. And she said, oh, I can't. No, just buy the land. This is stupid. Why do I need to come up there? Where is it? And I said, no, I can't tell you, but you need to come up here immediately. I can't. The kids, Brooke has Girl Scouts tomorrow or whatever. I said, I don't care. Find somebody, get up here. And she fell for it. So she got on a plane the next day, flew up here. I picked her up in Green Bay, all the way from Green Bay up to Sister Bay, nonstop. Why do I have to be here? What is this all about? Why couldn't you just send a picture or anything? And I said, no, just relax. And so the next morning, I took her over to this farm and I said, I want you to walk, we pull up to the driveway and she looks at this and she goes, what are all these buildings? What is this? And I said, it's a farm, but I want you to walk in, I want you to close your eyes and picture if that could be a cooking school for you. Well, that got her attention. And she went in and she came out and she said, are you serious? And I said, yeah, we could do this. And so we bought the property, paid way too much for it at that time. Yeah, but I got rid of everything. But anyway, that's how the cooking school got started. And she's a very creative woman, to say the least. And she said to me one day, I'm going to Madison because I want to talk to Wolf Sub-Zero, the appliance people. And I said, okay. So she drove to Madison. They don't know her from Julia Child. They don't know her at all. And she came back from that meeting with them as a corporate sponsor. So all the equipment, both at the farm, which is still there, and all this equipment is because of a partnership Janice started with them. And they were fantastic partners to work with. They didn't give it to me, keep in mind, but it was a good price. So everything they made, we have in here, literally everything. And they were a great partner, but they were smart. They knew that people were going to be in this building and they were going to use that stove and they were going to use that oven and all the other stuff. And they'd probably sell a lot of equipment, and I'm sure they did. They did. But that was all Janice. So that was, I think that's our story. I'm sticking to it. I don't know anything else to tell you.
How did you go from the farm to here? Yeah. I mean, you moved the school from there.
Well, when we built the school at the farm, that was a lot of work because there was a stairway in the kitchen and there was all kinds of goofy stuff that I had to redo. But the same guy who helped me build this, he and I did that building. And I told Janice when it was being built, Once again, we were over budget probably the first week of that project, way over budget. And I told her, I said, one of two things is going to happen here. One, this is going to be a successful enterprise, and I'm going to kick you out of here, and we're going to find you somewhere else to go. Or two, it's not going to work. The business plan didn't work, and you're going to end up with the coolest kitchen in Door County. Well, fortunately, the former was the case. Is 2 years, we couldn't handle it. I mean, she's done, I just told Steph, I think we calculated the other day, just she personally, not her guest chef, she's done almost 1,500 classes in Door County, her personally. And we probably did 100 at the school or at the farm. But it was too small a space. We didn't have the right parking. It just wasn't. It was an incubator. But we knew the formula worked. And so for 18 and a half years we were here, and we rate our success or lack thereof just the way a hotel would. So a hotel rates their success by occupancy, okay? And we do the same thing here. We have 20 seats to sell, and if we sell 18, our occupancy is 90% or whatever the number is. But in 19 years of doing this, we're about 99.8% occupancy. No. And part of that is if a person booked a class in this, they had to sign off and understand that if they had to cancel less than 2 weeks in advance, all bets are off. It's kind of like you buying a ticket to a theater. You can't call the theater back and go, you know what, I can't make it on Friday night. They're going to say, well, find somebody to give the tickets to. And so there were a lot of times where if somebody couldn't cancel, she'd have a waiting list and boom, they'd come in. So the last 4 years, I know we never had a year that was less than 100%. So, and that was Janice. She was good at what she did.
And now you're selling because
She just was ready for something new. Yeah. Yeah.
Not for retirement?
No. No. Well, I get left out another part of the business model is about 15 years ago, she went on a trip with my mother to Provence in France. And she met these people, and when she came back, she said, I could do that. And so long story short, now Janice runs culinary tours all over the world. Mm-hmm. She's gone to China, she's gone to Tuscany, she's been to Provence, she's been to Sicily, she's been to Italy, she's been to the Basque country of southern France and northern Spain. And this year we're doing 2 trips to Mexico and then the Basque country and Sicily in the spring. And that keeps her juices going. But I told Steph when she first got here, I've suggested a couple times to Janice, let's just have a party over here. I mean, what a great place to have a party, right? No, she won't come in here. I mean, she'll come in, but she doesn't want to reopen the door, you know? So she comes over here, but she has an office up there. She hasn't been in that office for 2 years. I know that. So I built her an office at home, but it's hard for her to let go, but she needs to separate, you know, she needs to separate. She can't keep coaxing it on. So we pray, and we've turned down several deals already, just so you know. We're very protective of Ellison Bay. I'm extremely protective of this building. And I want somebody cool to come in here and do the right thing. And we have some people now who fit that bill. We'll see if it happens. But we've had 2 people. One gave us a very good offer, and they wanted to meet with Janice and I. And because we weren't selling the business. We're you know, what you see, just the property, not the business. And so this person wanted to talk to Janice, and that's understandable. He wants to find out what, you know, how it works and all that. But he rubbed her wrong from the very second he sat down. I could see it in Janice. And Janice, for those of you who know her, she's pretty hard not to get along with. I mean, she's unlike me, who's more abrasive. She's pretty easy to get along with. Anyways, they made a very good offer, And I told, this is 2 days later, and I told Janice we got an offer, and I told her who it was, and she said, we're not selling to him. And I said, but the money is the exact same color. It really is the same color. And we could be done with all this. And she said, we are not selling to this person. And they're not going to live in our community. I went, so the broker called me and said, are you going to, have you received the offer? Yes. Are you going to accept the offer? No. Are you going to counter the offer? No. Well, what are you doing with the offer? And I said, we've rejected it. And that's it. So we're going to be very protective here. It's not going to become, and it's costing me, by the way, to be that way. Yeah, a little more than I'd like to think about. But yeah, we want it's a great community, and we know what's happening to our south. Yes. Yeah, and I don't want that to happen in Ellison Bay. And I want, some people have come in here and done some cool things. I'm thrilled the gas station is back open, and those guys at the Wickman House are trying to carry on a good tradition. And yeah, so I think that's it that I can think of. If you have questions, I do have some, because I probably forgot a few things, but that's okay. I really am surprised. I didn't know I'd be public speaking. I thought,
You're very good custodian.
Yeah.
well, you're kind to say that. You're kind to say that. But yeah, Janice is on her way to Boise, Idaho right now to go help her brother a little bit. And she said, well, how many people do you think will be there? And I said, I have no idea. And so when I pulled in the parking lot and I saw you all standing out there, I went, uh-oh, uh-oh. And I'm sorry I don't have coffee, tea, mints. I'm sorry. But, yeah. Now, if Janice is here, that might have been different. She probably would have made something, but I'm not equipped. Yes, sir.
So what's your next chapter?
Me personally?
Yeah, you've done 2 great build jobs.
Yeah, I'm looking. Yeah. I don't want to, I don't know yet. I don't know. I don't go on Janice's trips, typically. I might meet her at the end of a trip or go there with her before the trip starts, but I don't go with her. That's her baby. That's her thing, and I don't interfere. Plus, when I go on her trips, then I become like the footman, Yeah. And for example, there's a woman who many of you know, but she'll remain unnamed, who went to China with us. And I went on that trip because she begged me to go, and I said I would only go if we went to Hong Kong for a week. Because I'm a James Bond fan, and Hong Kong just sounds so intriguing to me. China, not so much. So we went to Hong Kong and had a great time. And one of the women there were 2 men, I believe. But anyways, one of the women who lives in this community part-time was on the trip, and she's elderly, and I literally became her footman. I mean, helping her in the van, out of the van, pulling the chair out for her, opening and walking her to her room at night. Yeah, I was her personal footman, but I typically don't go on those just for that reason. And it's her show. I don't need to go. But they're fun. If you've never seen anything about what she does, what her trips make are really unique are 2 things. Well, there's 3 actually. First thing is she picks really good people to work with in those communities, whether it's in Mexico, whether it's in Sicily or in the Basque Country, because it's all about the contractors that she contracts. They got to be really good. That's one really important thing. The other thing is there are only 10 people. They're not 30, they're 10. So you're riding in a Mercedes van versus a motor coach. You're eating in Michelin star restaurants. You're staying in 5-star hotels, and you're not in this big group of people. So she's kind of built this niche. It's kind of like a boutique travel company. And we don't get involved in making arrangements. We just say, we'll meet you in Barcelona, or we'll meet you in Palermo, or we'll meet you in Mexico City, or wherever it is. And how you get there and when you come and when you leave is up to you. But yeah. So I hope that
Can we see the
you can see all you want. Absolutely. Just so you know, this building is ADA compliant. I was really insistent on that, and that became a challenge because obviously those front steps are not ADA compliant. So we built a ramp out the back, And Janice is a very visual-driven person, and she said, there's no way we're pouring a concrete ramp on this property. There's no way. I said, okay, well, we can't have flagstone because that's not ADA approved. It's got to be a smooth surface. So we ended up putting a retaining wall and gravel, but the bathroom is ADA compliant. And where you were standing, you probably didn't know that you were standing right next to all the septic cupboards and all that. Once again, there's no way that at any property that Janice Thomas is involved in are you going to ever see stuff like that. So all that screening, that was her, right. And the other funny story about her in this building is these cabinets are made in Dykesville, and she knew exactly what the color was and all this and that, but she wanted them distressed. And, you know, that's kind of the new thing, if you will. So I said her dad would roll in his grave if he saw that you would take a perfectly fine cabinet and then take a nail and just go like that. And just, yeah, but they did a beautiful job on all the cabinetry. Yeah, beautiful job on that. Yeah, so stroll around. Once again, the store, there, definitely look at the pictures. There's some great pictures in there. Tell me your first and last name.
Larry Nelson and James.
Okay.
Right, I was a Weaver.
Oh, you are? Okay. Well, you are still a Weaver.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So if you're connected with any of the Gills Rock Weavers, that's right.
Oh, perfect.
And we met in high school.
Yeah.
And we're going to be married 65 years.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So you knew Kay then?
Right, right.
And we have a farm on Blackberry Road.
Yeah.
Oh, you do?
One time when I broke up with him, it's hard to get a date, you know, because
Yeah.
so I said to Kay, she was dating somebody in Green Bay. I said, could you find me somebody? So she did.
Oh, she did?
But I was that kid.
Oh, you're a lucky man. Oh, yeah, excuse me.
I was a school teacher.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
I was a third grade teacher, and then I was like got my master's and ended up a reading session.
Hey, come here, I'll show you this. I'm going to move you just a little to your left. So that's Genevieve's mom.
Okay, that's Olga.
I mean, look how young she looks.
Yeah, right.
Can you imagine being in Ellison Bay in 1914? What this was like, you know, dirt streets, lumberjacks.
Well, even my days, all the back roads were all gravel.
Right.
Yeah,
We
there
didn't have
were, and
any
two
lights.
lanes, like going to Cane Island, so just two lanes. There were logging roads.
You can see the trim work on here.
Yeah.
It took me 3 weeks, me personally, to restore all those because I was determined to. And then I don't know, do you know Myron Beard?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Well, Myron's done a lot of work too. Did you? Great guy, a true artist. And you know, he said, "Well, Michael, you know where they got those, right?" And I said, "No, not really." He said, "Sears catalog."
Yeah. Oh, sure.
That's the picture I had, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, my grandfather.
And this you gave me too.
Yeah, and if you ever want to.
Okay.
The original. Was about 13, over 13.
Yeah, the Rucker boys are right here. Right?
Yeah, in the back row.
But
People won't know.
I wanted to show what the building looked like when it was finished, and that's what it looked like. And you can see there were no trees, but that building went back much further. And that's Dorothy Peterson right there.
Oh,
The second girl.
She was so nice.
Completely logged everything off.
That was the big thing. Right.
No,
Right.
I believe it. As a matter of fact, when Dorothy gave me that picture, she said, "I don't know if I should give it to you. I'm that fat little kid on this." I said, "First of all, you're not fat. You're cute as can be with that little Dutch white haircut." But since then, several people have said to me, "What are they sitting on?" I go, "That's a teeter totter." She go, It's made out of wood. And I said, what do you think they had up here, man? That's all they had is wood. They didn't have stucco and cement and things like that. They had wood. Lots of it.
Well, if you go to Newport, so you got a candy store now, you'll see a picture of me along with all our kids, the rest of the kids in the entryway.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
He was a good guy.
Newport School. Newport School.
You did a nice job.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Well, I'm really surprised. I really didn't know. I didn't know who was going to.
Oh, they were coming in. I was wondering how big the group was going to get.
We just looked at your house a long time ago.
Which one, the farmhouse?
Yeah. I loved all the buildings.
Yeah.
We looked at every house for sale in Dark County for 10 years.
You know, the funny thing was, well, Carolyn, she was been a real estate person up here forever. Yeah. And when it came time to sell that, all the brokers, you know, Heather Olson lived across the street from me, and her daughter, you know, all these other people said, oh man, you need to split this up. Because it was zoned HL5, so I could, and I said, I'm not doing this. And they said, nobody wants to buy 40 acres. They just want to buy like a house in 10. And at that time, the last thing you wanted to own in Door County was vacant land. You couldn't give it away. 5,000. I know. You couldn't give it away. So I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And, so I took it off the market. And then, well, I don't know how much longer, somebody called me, Sarah Glenn called me and said, would you still be interested in selling your farm? And I said, because we resigned ourselves that we were going to just stay there, not worry about it, just enjoy it. And I said, well, we'd sell it, but it's all or nothing. We're not splitting it off. And she said, well, that's what that person wants. And they came to look at it. Yeah. Yeah. They looked at it at 2 o'clock, and at 5 I had a full cash price off. That was 2004, probably. 5, maybe. I think just a little before the war, 40. And,